I worry very much, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, that we are moving very, very quickly from a democratic society, one person, one vote, to an oligarchic form of society where billionaires will be determining who the elected officials of this country are. And I'm going to do everything I can to stop that.
The rate of income tax ought to be set on the ability to pay it, and at the moment the top rate is too low. I would go 50% and possibly slightly higher, but I'm actually more interested in collecting uncollected corporation tax and corporate taxation.
Would 60% be too high?
Can I finish? The real issue is corporate tax fraud across the world.
And here's the point. This is the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. But nobody in America knows it because their standard of living is going down and almost all of the new wealth is going to the top 1%. That is an issue that we have to deal with. In the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, top 1/10 of 1% should not own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Everybody in this country should in fact have at least a minimum and dignified standard of living.
People living here in Britain deserve to be able to live decently. Every child deserves to be able to be fed properly, go to school and live decently.
So just answer that scenario.
That is what the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is about. That is what the Children's Act is about.
Everybody should be able to get all of the education they need, regardless of the income of their families. What does that mean? It means that we should go back to where we were 50 years ago and what other countries around the world are doing, Germany, many other countries, and say, you want to go to college? You have the ability to go to college, you have the desire to go to college. Public colleges and universities will be tuition free because education must be a right of all people.
Value education for the learning it gives, not for the commodity it presents itself as. People and children come first. The amount of money involved is not that great when compared to the total budget as a whole. What we're doing is going in a wrong direction by impoverishing children of large families, and particularly in London, where the benefit cap has had a devastating effect on people in the private rented sector.
So it seems to me that when you look at basic necessities of life, education, healthcare, nutrition, there must be a guarantee that people receive what they need in order to live a dignified life.
Everyone wants to live in a decent society. Everyone is one accident away from a dependence on the welfare state and dependence on the NHS. Everybody has older people who need adult social care.
But they were this.
Healthcare, to my mind, is a right of all people. Okay, that's what I believe. I think every man, woman, and child is entitled to healthcare, and that right exists in virtually every other major industrialized country on earth. We are the odd guys out there. Despite the modest gains of the Affordable Care Act, we have 35 million people who still have no health insurance, and more importantly, millions more are underinsured with high copayments and high deductibles. So I believe that healthcare should be a right. I believe in a Medicare for all people, and I think that is not an area where private insurance companies should be functioning. Because once you have private insurance companies there, their goal is to make as much money as possible, not to provide quality care.
We have a finite need of providing health, education, providing social services, supporting housing, supporting infrastructure, all those very important areas of government expenditure. And the biggest problem area is not income tax, it's actually corporation tax and corporate tax evasion.
And there's been a huge redistribution of wealth in the last 30 years from the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%. Now, the other thing that you understand globally is you have horrendous imbalance in terms of wealth in the world. As I mentioned earlier, the top 1% will own more than the bottom 99% in a year or so. That's absurd.
My goal is to reduce inequality. To completely end inequality is obviously a very difficult thing to do, but the levels of inequality that have grown to such catastrophic levels in Britain have to be challenged. The 100 richest people own as much as a third of the entire population. We have the grossest levels of income disparity of anywhere in Europe. We have the very wealthy buying up large parts of London in order to keep it empty and use it as an investment bank for the future.
But the issue that I want to be talking about is the collapse of the American middle class. You guys gonna write about that? Yeah. Is that an important issue? The need to create millions of decent paying jobs. The obscenity of the kind of level of income and wealth inequality that we have today. The reason our campaign is doing well is because people are responding to those issues.
It's a thirst of people looking for space, looking for democracy and looking for an alternative, because we've been told there's no alternative to austerity and that our children are going to be worse off than we are and our children's children are going to be worse off than our children. People don't accept that, and so what we're providing is an open democratic space.
The reason this campaign is doing well because we're talking about the issues that impact the American people.
That is the level of interest in an engaged form of sensible, civilized politics where people can understand that there is an alternative. We don't have to accept this Me Tooism in economic policies. I have to say, we've accepted no money whatsoever from any corporate sources. We're not. I have to say also, we haven't been offered any either, so.
And I'm proud, by the way, that vast majority of our money comes from working people, not from the rich. But if I'm a normal politician who needs to raise $20, $50 million, where am I going to go? I'm going to sit down with the wealthy. I'm going to go to the country club. I'm going to do my fundraisers at fancy resorts. And I get to know those people. But that's the whole point of this corrupt campaign finance system. If you're going to contribute $1 million to my super PAC, well, maybe you're a hell of a nice guy and you like to participate. Or maybe you want something. I think you want something. And you and I are going to become really good buddies so I can do your bidding. In other words, the millionaire class and the billionaire class increasingly own the political process and they own the politicians who go to them for money.
I would want the super rich to be able to pay properly their share of the needs of the rest of the community.
But they wouldn't be super rich anymore, would they?
But the issue is actually that there's a crossover between income tax and high income people over towards the corporate tax sector, and they often evade taxation by that means. And so I think we should be looking at the way in which big companies, Boots and others, shifted their head offices out of Britain into low tax regimes and pretending that their income has solely come from those areas. That is tax evasion on a grand scale.
Taking on Wall Street, taking on the military-industrial complex, taking on private insurance companies, taking on pharmaceutical industry. I don't think that makes me a career politician. I think that makes me as a candidate who is standing up for working people and prepared to take on the big money interest in this country. Do I believe that the United States should be playing an even-handed role in terms of its dealings with the Palestinian community in Israel? Absolutely, I do. Again, I think that you have volatile regions in the world. Middle East is one of them. And the United States has got to work with other countries around the world to fight for Israel's security and existence at the same time as we fight for a Palestinian state where the people in that country can enjoy a decent standard of living, which is certainly not the case right now.
I think to bring about a peace process, you have to talk to people with whom you may profoundly disagree. There is not going to be any peace process unless there is talks involving Israel, Hezbollah and Hamas. And I think everybody knows that.
When you talk about foreign policy, you're talking about many, many things. But maybe the most important thing that you're talking about is war.
Trident nuclear missiles are due for replacement in 2016. Those missiles, if replaced and the main gate decision is made, will cost around £100 billion over the lifetime of the submarines and the missiles, about 25 years. That £100 billion should not be spent on those weapons of mass destruction. In my view, those weapons of mass destruction are not a defense against anything, they're a grave danger.
But I think war is the very, very, very last option.
We went to war in Iraq on the basis of dishonesty, on the basis of non-existent weapons of mass destruction, and on the basis that the US wanted us to do it, therefore it was a good thing.
And I happen to believe that when you talk about foreign policy, at the very top of the list is the need for the United States to lead the world, to work with China, work with Russia, work with India in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuels and into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And this is not just a quote-unquote environmental issue. This is also a global national security issue as well.
I am against the fracking idea. I'm against the development of shale gas for a number of reasons. One is it seems to me a very backward-looking idea that instead of dealing with our energy needs by conservation, protection and efficiency, we instead go for something that is unbelievably pollutive of the groundwater, great consumer of water, and it's all very, very short term.
I'm a member of both the Energy Committee and the Environmental Committee. I listen to what the scientists are saying, not only in America, but around the world. And that is, climate change is real, it's caused by human activity. It is an international crisis, and I have to tell you, without being overtly political here, it is an embarrassment to me that we have a major political party called the Republican Party, which with few exceptions refuses to even recognize the reality of climate change, let alone is prepared to do anything about it. That is an embarrassment, that you have a major party refusing to listen to science.
So we don't live in the past, we don't live in the history, we learn from what they did, and we look to how we change our policies for the future so that we can provide real hope and real opportunity into the 21st century of a society of full employment, of a society of social justice, of a government that doesn't want to go to war everywhere else in the world, but wants to be an agency for peace, for justice, and for human rights around the world.
They divide people on gay marriage, they divide people on abortion, they divide people on immigration. And what my job is, and it's not just in blue states, believe me, we're going to go to red states, we're going to go to conservative states, is to bring working people together around an agenda that works for their kids and works for their parents. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, having a trade policy that creates jobs in America, not in China, making sure that all of our kids can get a college education regardless of their income, fighting for pay equity for women workers.
Together, we're very, very strong. Individually, not so strong. Isolated, we tend to be rather weak. Isn't it best to be strong and be together?
Are you aware of the rise of Jeremy Corbyn as the UK Labour Party candidate, and whether that's something you think you can tap into, and whether you've got a message for that
I
campaign?
think whether it's the UK or here in the United States, here's the answer. People are sick and tired of establishment politics. They're sick and tired of a politics in which candidates continue to represent the rich and the powerful, go out begging money from the wealthy. They are sick and tired of an economics in which almost all of the new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. And they're tired of a media which continues to want to have gotcha questions and make conflict between the candidates rather than talking about the real issues impacting the American people. And that is why I'm not familiar with what's going on daily there. I am aware of the candidate. But I think that is what's going on in this campaign. The American people are saying enough is enough. Why is it that almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%? Why is it that our kids can't afford to go to college? Why is it that our child care system is dysfunctional? Why is it that we're the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all of our people who have family and medical leave? The American people want us to address those issues. They do not want us to be attacking each other. They want a focus, they want a real debate on real issues, and I intend to give it to them.
I'm somebody that has spent my life in the peace movement and human rights movement. Do I have criticisms of American foreign policy? Yes, many people do. Do I dislike America? Absolutely no. I've been there many times and I have many friends in the USA, and indeed I'm following Bernie Sanders' campaign with great interest, and we're exchanging leaflets and badges and things like that. So it's great.